Rebholz, and I'm from Madison, Wisconsin, and I build hard-on fiddles and play the instrument, and I have students, and I do repairs. And my first talk was about a background on the hard-on fiddle, which I just finished talking about, and now I'm going to talk about going to Voss, Norway, to work with the fiddle makers there. And so I call it April in Voss. So this, you see, this is me. And this is Sigvald Rohrling. He this was April 2018. And he was the 71 years old and the head fiddle maker at the Ole Academy in Voss, Norway. And he retired the month after I left. And this is Wiebke Luders, who's now in charge of that workshop. She's from East Germany originally and trained in musical instrument conservation in Vienna. I found, as I go to different places, I find manhole covers really interesting. So I took this one from Voss, Norway. You know, maybe we can turn down the lights somehow so that you can actually see the slides a little better. But this manhole cover in Voss has the symbol of the city here, a reindeer with horns. And all around the manhole cover are people doing extreme sports, because that's what Voss is known for, is extreme sports, skiing on the mountains, paragliding in the summer. But there's no hard-on fiddle on the manhole cover. And this is the only place in the world you can learn to make these instruments in a regular program. So anyway, I was at a master class for playing hard-on fiddles in Norway in 2016, and I brought some instruments I made along with me to show anyone who would look at them. And I found myself at Ole Academy, and I didn't know it was the only place in the world you could learn to build hard-on fiddles. And my friend Toby, who's here from Syracuse, New York, was also at master class. He said, you have to show your fiddles to Sigvald. And so he took me over to the fiddle building workshop at Ole Academy, where I was having the master class for playing. And he showed my fiddles to Sigvald and Wiebke and the student at the time, Ulla Gerde. And he talked a long time in Norwegian about my fiddles with Sigvald. And we left, and I didn't know any Norwegian at the time. And as we left, he said, do you know what he said? And I said, no, I don't know what he said. I didn't understand any of it. And he said, Toby told me that Sigvald said I had to come back, that he wanted to teach me some things. And I thought, great. And Sigvald told Toby that it didn't have to cost much. I could stay with him, stay with Sigvald. And because I had been able to learn a lot on my own about building hard-on fiddles, but there are some details that you can't just learn from books or by measuring instruments. There's a lot that's done intuitively and things that are different from what's in books, and he wanted to show me those things. So fast forward so I had this offered from Sigvald to come back, and I was demonstrating hard-on fiddle building at Nordic Fest for Vesterheim the next summer, and someone came over to me from American Scandinavian Foundation to tell me about their grants. And it was July 30th, and they have grants for people interested in the 4 or 5 upper Midwest states interested in things related to Scandinavian culture. And someone said, you'd be a great person to get a grant. And so the grants it was July 30th, the grant was due August 2nd. And I went home and I wrote. And I was really lucky because I had this offer from Sigvald, and I had stuff that I'd done before, and I put the grant together, and they funded it for me to go back to study with Sigvald in Norway. So I was super appreciative to them for making the opportunity available. So I flew. This is a map of the lower part of Norway. I flew into Bergen, Norway, and then took the train an hour and a quarter to Voss. So Voss to Vangen is, means there's a body of water there. But so into a bit of the interior of Norway to Voss. And arrived at the train station, and because I had been there before, I knew where I was going, up the hill to Olivil Academy and the Fiddle Builder's Workshop, so, which is here. This is the view from the workshop down towards the big lake. And there I found Sigvald in the workshop. He often has friends with him. He's a gregarious man, and people love to come and play instruments and kibitz with Sigvald. And so this was a friend who was there playing, and Sigvald seated at his workbench with the windows here overlooking the lake, the sun looking south so that there was really great light. And he kind of looked at me, and he was a bit nervous because he didn't know what he'd do with me. He said I could come for a month, but how do you teach someone to build a hard-iron fiddle in a month? And but luckily I had planned. So I had this grant, and the grant I had proposed that I wanted to learn more about making great sounding instruments, things that I couldn't learn just by measuring historic instruments or from books. And so I brought a fiddle in pieces. So I'd done a lot of the preliminary work back in Madison and brought it in pieces so that it could be assembled there and we could do all the fine tuning. And then I brought a second instrument that I had made before that was my least favorite sounding instrument. And I thought we could take it apart and change it up and hopefully improve the sound. So he was very happy once he saw that I had a plan, and that he did tell me that what I wanted to learn would take 6 months, but we worked really hard and I learned a lot.
So did the fiddle sound better after the month?
Yeah, so we're going to get to that at the end. But yeah, so this is the Google Earth image of the area. So this is the lake, and Olivil Academy is here. This is downtown Voss. But Sigvald lives in Dyrvedalen, in the valley where he grew up. And I found that he has a strict routine, and I arrived at like 2:45, and he always leaves every day at 3. So he whisked me away to Dyrvedalen and his home. This is Sigvald's home. I don't know if it's better if I stand over here. Sigvald's home is nestled into the hillside overlooking the same lake. This is his home here, and gravel road, the lake. When I arrived, there was ice on the lake. This is April, early April. Mountains, low light. This yellow building is a school. It was a valley without very many people, but lots of life because there are so many young kids around. And I was happy that first day that I had arrived jet-lagged, and Sigvald said I could sleep in the next morning. But I didn't realize that sleeping in meant that he would wake me at 6:36 Norwegian time, which is like 11:36 Wisconsin time at night. So, and we left, we arrived at 7:40 at Olivil Academy, only 15 minutes after he normally arrives. So like he gave me an extra 15 minutes, but he sticks to a strict schedule. At Olivil, part of his schedule is every morning when he gets in, he he meets his friend Pear, also works at Oliveville Academy. They have coffee, they chat, and he gets to work. Lunch is at 11:30 every day, and everyone working at the academy that day gathers in the cafeteria with windows overlooking the lake to have their lunch together. It's really fun to meet up with everyone every morning. Like in this picture, here's Sigvald and Wiebke, and this is Arne Anderdahl. He teaches Hardanger fiddle and has been to Wisconsin several times to teach. And the head of the academy, another fiddle teacher, administrator that keeps everything running. So, and then Sigvald continues to work, and then at 3 o'clock he heads home sharp every day and cooks his main meal of the day. And the main meal often consists of he's very resourceful and uses things around him. So the meatballs are from the deer on the hillside. And in the home that he built himself, he has a room in the basement where he gets 1,000 pounds of potatoes delivered every year, and keeps him and his neighbors draw out potatoes until they're all gone. But a lot of food comes right from the area that he cooks. And then once the meal is done, he takes a power nap and heads to his home workshop, which he calls Stora Groa. So he goes up this gravel road into the valley, past the farm where he was born, to another piece of property where he built his workshop. So he calls his workshop Stora Groa. This is a picture of it. He explained to me that Stora Groa meant big river. And I found out as the snow was melting in the valley that being able to control water is really important in the area, and Sigvald was a master at controlling water. So Stora Groa means big river because before he built this workshop, there's a big river that went down there. And to build it, he dug a tunnel and under the road and put in a drainage pipe, and the river now goes under the workshop and out the other side. And so there's Sigvald outside, a lot of wood, and there's the interior of the workshop, or the exterior of the workshop. Then I noticed this along his house. So this is the side of his house, and the snow was melting, and there was a big river coming right down the side of his house. And then it would exit and go under his driveway, under the road, and out the other side. This is right next to Sigvald's house. There's a river and a mill. And one day we were at home. He was preparing the midday meal, and I saw the gravel of his driveway starting to erode with some water coming down it. And I mentioned it to Sigvald. I mean, the stream had just started coming down the driveway and eroding the gravel. And he said, "Oh no," and quick jumped up into action. And he has a tractor, and took his tractor up the gravel road and diverted the stream that was coming down his driveway into the bigger river, the stream from the melt, and then used the tractor eventually to repair the rest of the driveway. So keeping track of the water is really important, and having a tractor to repair the gravel roads where you live is also really helpful. So here's Sigvald in Stora Groa, his home workshop. Lots of tools, and the windows that overlook the lake. There's the lake. And tools. He has even more tools here than he has at Oliveville Academy. And not just for woodworking. He's built a boat at this workshop. He does car repairs. He has his tractor. This is a big jack. They were changing out snow tires for regular tires one day. This tank back here, he's scavenged from a water heater, and he was going to convert it to use to dry wood under vacuum. So he has lots of big projects and ideas at his workshop, Stora Groa. And he pointed this poster out to me, which is on the door to his workshop. And he said, "That's me, I'm Reodor Felgen." Of course, Sigvald didn't really speak much English, but this is what he was trying to say. And has anyone heard of Reodor Felgen before? So he's the main character in the movie Flo Klipa Grand Prix. And that movie, Flo Klipa Grand Prix, is a movie that's been seen more than any other movie in Norway. It was made in 1975, I think it was, and played continuously in a Norwegian theater until 2002, I think, and had been viewed 5.5 million times in a country that has 5 million people. So it was a really important movie, and now it's always played at Christmas time on the TV. But the main character is Reodor Felgen, who is just like Sigvald. He's a guy who loves the countryside, is suspicious of city folk, is really at home in the countryside. He's kind of like a mad genius inventor, and he has two compatriots. This is Solon, a magpie who's a perky creature, and this is Ludwig, the melancholy hedgehog. But just like Reodor Felgen, Sigvald builds lots of his own tools and is very resourceful, like you have to be in the countryside when you need to build everything yourself. So in my previous talk, I showed some of my thickness calipers and little planes. Well, Sigvald built his own thickness caliper, and these planes he cast from brass himself. And this is a tool that he made out of, forged out of metal that cuts a notch into the side of an instrument, the exact size of the piece of shell he wants to inlay. So that's a tool he made for doing that. And this one is for making a sound post. This is to help him make the circles on the pegs. This is to use for engraving bone. So he makes lots of things. So at his workshop, right after I arrived at Storegroa, he said, "You need scrapers. Did you bring scrapers?" And I brought some tools with me. So scrapers are flat pieces of metal that you can use to smooth the surface of wood instead of sandpaper. And the advantage to them is that they take off very fine shavings of wood very cleanly, so you get a surface that's very smooth and not, sandpaper leaves it abraded, whereas scrapers are really useful for woodworking. So I was proud to say I brought scrapers. I had these little commercial made things, and Sigvald shook his head at my scrapers, pulled out an old saw blade, and got to work. He cut the saw blade into these shapes, and then used his grinder to smooth the curves, and handed me the scrapers, and said, "You need these, basically. They're much more functional, the curves are better, they're stiffer. Those things you brought from the commercial company aren't going to work as well." So then he proceeded to show me how to use the scrapers to create the exterior contour on the top. So this is the piece of the top of the instrument that I brought with me from Wisconsin. He didn't like the way I had carved it, so I was there to learn about making the sound better. And so he said, "You're going to cry, but we're going to change this." And I told him, "No, I'm not going to cry. I want to learn whatever you can teach me." And so he went to work showing me how how to get better sound by contouring it in a different way. And I had carefully recorded the curves on a really good historic instrument and was using that as a model for my carving. And he said, no, that over time that instrument has changed shape. And so the asymmetry you see, you shouldn't be reproducing. You need to make it symmetrical. And so he taught me that. We used a contour gauge back and forth to make sure that the contours were matched on either side of the instrument. And we'll see if this plays. Then the instrument I measured didn't have smooth curves, it kind of had sharper curves. And he said sharper curves make sharper notes, like harsh sounds. And he was showing me that by using this piece of wood as an example. As he curved the wood and tapped it, it made higher notes and less desirable sounds. But it was just an example of how the shape of the wood affects the sound you hear.
This one there. This one you will have what is called.
So that's just Sigvald tapping. I'm going to have a few more things about him tapping as I continue to talk. So I think I mentioned Sigvald built a boat at his workshop. So when he needed a tool for scooping out the interior of the wood, he took a cleat from the boat and put a blade around it and made a really handy tool for easily taking out the wood, much easier than the chisels I was using. This is another tool he made for to make it easier to get to the thicknesses he wanted. So he showed me, one of the things that he wanted to show me when I returned to Norway was how to make a bass bar and carve it in response to the tones I was hearing. So a violin bass bar, a modern violin bass bar, which is how I'd been making them previously, is bigger and heavier, whereas the Hardanger fiddle bass bars are smaller and more flexible. So we carefully fit the piece of wood to the interior of the top. And then he started to carve it away with chisels and scrapers. So I have another video of Sigvald tapping. So you can see how he taps his fingernail, listens to the sound, and carves in response to what he's hearing. It's the intuitive way of getting at a great sounding instrument. So here's, this is another one as he continues to refine it. Like, he was using a little plane there, but this is a scraper. So he liked that, and does a little bit of sanding. And the goal was to make the sound the same all the way across as you tap. Now, I don't know if you could hear the sound being all the same, but I had a hard time. And so did everyone else in the workshop. And we could describe to me how they had heated discussions about what they were hearing. And everyone's fingernail sounded different, and no one sounded exactly like Sigvald's. So she tried using different things instead of a fingernail to try and make a reproducible sound. But learning how to carve by just hearing the tapping takes a long time of training your ear to know what you're doing and how it's going to relate to the final sound of the instrument. So I was trying to learn that from Sigvald while I was there, but there's another way of looking at the vibrations of the plates, which is the top and bottom of the instrument, which is what Sigvald's doing by tapping. And it's called plate tuning, and I use this to understand what Sigvald was doing just with his ears and with the tapping. And what plate tuning is that you can take the top and bottom of a violin before they're put together with the entire instrument and use a speaker and a single wavelength of sound to induce a vibration on the top of the plate. And you can see how the plate is vibrating by putting sand, in this case, or tea leaves, or glitter, or something on it. So a pattern like this doesn't occur at every wavelength of sound. It just, you can go through a range of sound and record the wavelength at which this occurs. And there are different patterns that form. But what this is showing is that this part is moving a lot, and where the sand collects is not moving at all. So this is a vibration pattern. And by looking at the symmetry of the pattern and the wavelength at which it occurs, I start to get at what Sigvald is trying to do with this tapping. So it's controversial, and there's a lot to this plate tuning stuff, but I just wanted to throw it up there as another way of looking at what he was doing. So in trying to make great sounding instruments, he showed me that the bridge should be positioned at the center of mass, and he balanced the top on a blade and recorded, or put a mark where that was, and that's where the bridge of the instrument goes, this here. So it's not just about measurements, it's about mass. And then the sound post he talked to me about positioning the sound post. So the pieces of the instrument, which I didn't take a picture of, I'm sorry to say, but the sides and the top and the bottom, when they were ready, we glued together and then glued the neck, or cut into that sound box, attached the neck, and glued it on here. Right here is the way I made bridges before I went to work with Sigvald. And these are other Hardanger fiddle bridges around it. So different makers make things differently, and people have a lot of ideas about what's good and what's not good. Sigvald told me mine was not good. And so this is his template. So ever since, and this side was small, is the small side of the template. The gray is the bigger side, and there are slight differences between one and the other, and he uses them in different ways when he carves these bridges out of maple. So this is Sigvald carving. He starts with a rectangular piece of wood and then carves it into the bridge with the dimensions that fit a specific fiddle. So I've talked a bunch about what I was learning in the workshop, but I was learning a lot more than that because I was living with Sigvald and interacting with everyone on site. And one weekend, Wiebke said, let's go to your stollen. So Sigvald has what he calls a stollen in the valley here. So his Oliebull is there. Dyrvedalen is his home and workshop and the farm where he grew up. And the stollen is the cabin where he and his mom would take the animals in the summer. So you probably heard Heidi and the goats up in the mountain or whatever. It happens in Norway too, to get grazing land. As the snow melts, they'll take the animals up. And people still have rights to grazing in specific areas. And Sigvald still has this stolen. So here's Wiebke and Sigvald. And we drove to near the spot on the map, and there was snow, 2 meters thick. Like, here's the roof, here's the snow. We drove up the mountain to the end of the road, and then the last 25 minutes of the journey to the Stollen were, Wiebke and I were sitting on this trailer being pulled behind the ATV, and Sigvald was sitting on the ATV. So we went 25 minutes through, on top of 2 meters of snow, to his cabin in the mountains. So there's Sigvald. And here I am looking backwards at the trail behind me, my foot, and our fiddle cases that we took for the weekends. And here we are, our destination. This is Sigvald's stolen, his cabin. There are some other cabins up there, other farm families that graze their animals there historically. And we did things like cross-country skiing. And of course, Sigvald's a wood guy, so he had to chop wood. This that he used throughout the year. He would harvest wood off the mountainside and chop it. The snow was up to the roof of this building, and he had his wood pile on top that he was chopping and sawing and preparing wood for the fire. And if there was ever a good one that he thought would be good for fiddle building, he would save that one aside. The neighbor where Sigvald left his car at the farm where he picked up the ATV for the last 25-minute ride, she came up to the stolen and brought us lefse and 2 meters of snow, but it was like 55 degrees and sunshine, which was it was great to sit on the porch and have lefse. Inside, we had our fiddles, so Sigvald taught us tunes. And we had a great weekend. The cabin, Sigvald built it. It has solar power. It has a dish for bringing in signal TV, I guess. We didn't really listen to TV, but we can. We had TV. It has water. My family had a summer cabin, and we always closed it down in the fall because it wasn't winterized. Because the pipes would freeze in the winter. But this one, there's a reservoir on the mountain. He ran pipes underground and under the cabin, and because the snow was thick enough, they never froze. So he had, it wasn't like running water everywhere like they would in the summer, but enough water that we didn't need to bring in. So it was very, Norwegians are very advanced in a lot of things they do, and his cabin was high-tech, despite being so remote. So as we stayed over the weekend, the snow was melting, so the way back was a bit more treacherous. So this is a tiny little bridge over a river, and as the snow was melting, it melted from the outside in, so that the snow was like 2 meters high, but only about that wide, and he had to get the ATV across it. And that was kind of treacherous. And they did some shoveling to try and make sure we could get across safely. But then on the other side, the ATV slipped into a depression, or like the snow, there was like a crevasse underneath, and it slipped over. And of course, no problem for Sigvald. There's a winch on the front of the ATV. We unloaded the trailer, and Sigvald hooked the winch up to a tree and pulled the ATV out, and we were on our way. So back in the workshop, I told you a lot of people like to come to visit Sigvald. They do lots of repairs. This is Sigvald working on a bass, and it was fun. It was great for me to see the kind of repairs they were doing and to learn from that. This is a man who was building fiddles, or not building fiddles, he was building flutes. And so he was in there sometimes working on his flutes and talking with Sigvald. This is Sigvald's friend Per, the one he has coffee with every morning. He's making strings for hard iron fiddles on a machine that Sigvald made. So the strings for these instruments are just for these instruments. You can't buy them from regular suppliers. Actually, so they're made. There are 2 places in Norway that make them. Sigvald's one of them. And I'm not a merchandise manager for the Hard Iron Fiddle Association of America, which means that I have the whole United States supply of hard iron fiddle strings in my house. And so anyone in the U.S. or I've sent to Australia, England, anyone that needs hard iron fiddle strings, we're a great resource. and I send them out from my house. But they're made from gut and silver that's wrapped and on machines like this, like Sigvald has made. He made this machine, he told me, because the other string company in Norway, he didn't like their strings, he didn't think they were good enough, so he thought he could make them better. And these are Sigvald's daughters. Tona is at the workshop at Storegroa, and she would come in to chat with her dad, and she was knitting socks for her nephew's bunad. Her nephew was about to be confirmed, and usually bunad is traditional Norwegian clothing from a specific region, and it's common for a young person to receive their bunad on their confirmation. And people often make these special clothes themselves, and Aunt Tona was making the leggings or stockings. And this is his other daughter who did hard-on embroidery and beadwork for the cross, traditional bunad. So was there in April around the Easter holidays, and I found Norwegians had a lot of days off. So Sigvald would take off and I would go in and carve, but sometimes I would participate in what was going on. And this was May 1st, May Day. They had the day off, and there was a protest march in downtown Voss. Voss is a town of about 5,000 people, but a lot of them came out for the protest march and to support labor and the rights of workers on May Day. And I stood with WWVP behind a sign that said equal pay for women for equal jobs. So they have similar issues like that in Norway. This is the church in the middle of Voss that was started about 600 AD, a big stone church. So the workshop, again, at Rebholz Academy wasn't just about building fiddles. WWVP, on her days off, she built marionettes, and her dream was to have a marionette theater. So it was fun to watch her carving marionettes, and then to have her assistants come in and have them work on moving the marionettes around the workshop to practice. It just added a lot of life to things. This is, Sigvald made space for her in the workshop so that she could build this temporary stage. And this is WWVP working her puppets at a rehearsal for her first performance. This is Einar Molsnes and Knut Hamre. And those people are hard-on fiddle players. And they teamed up with WWVP to provide music and the dialogue for her marionette theater show. So it's a collaboration between the traditional hard-on fiddle and music culture and the people practicing it, and someone new coming in who wants a marionette theater and builds on that tradition and comes up with something new for the people. So she's continued to build her theater. Also, while I was in Voss, there was a Nortrad was there. It was a folk music gathering of students from folk music schools in 7 Scandinavian and Baltic countries. And that happened during a week while I was there at Rebholz Academy. And the great thing for me was that they communicated with each other in English. And so I could participate in everything. And the man here is Steinar Afsal. He's a flute player who was really famous in Norway, actually. He was holding court outside. This is a fiddle workshop here, Rebholz Academy here, and students that he was chatting with about his flutes. This is a program for the week. I helped proofread the English. So the Norwegians wrote it in English, and then I edited it. They gave tours of the fiddle workshop in English, and so I helped with the tours for the students. And then one of the events during the week was a concert at the Finnisloftet in Voss. The Finnisloftet is this building here. It's one of the oldest secular wooden buildings in Norway. And if you go in the summer, you can visit it. It was a guild hall in Voss. It's built from timbers with the brown creosote-like stuff that's used to preserve them. You see this kind of building in the stave churches that you may have seen before. So there was a concert in the Finnisloftet that was really beautiful. And then every Thursday, the Voss Spelmanslag got together to play. So this room is the basement of Ole Bull Academy, and a Spelmanslag is a group of fiddle players, and in this case, Hardanger fiddle players. And they meet every week as a group to learn tunes from each other and to play together. And in this way, the tradition is passed on. So there's Arne Anderdal, who I pointed out before, who's the head of the Voss Spelmanslag. And I mentioned he's been here to Wisconsin to teach. So I knew some of the tunes already that I learned from him in Wisconsin that they were playing in Voss. And so I could sit in and play with them, which was super fun. And I remember one night, he went around the circle and every person got to suggest a new tune to play. And when they got to me, I think they thought, what's this American going to suggest? But I had a tune that I learned from Arna that they hadn't played yet. And I started to play it, and then everyone started to play along. So it was really fun. And then they have dances every week in Voss, too. The Spelmanslag was playing for that dance, and people from the town were gathering to dance the traditional dances, and it was just a part of their life. Not everyone plays folk music, and actually very few people play folk music, and not a lot of people dance, but it's still a living tradition that some people practice. So by the third week, we had my fiddle strung up that I had brought in pieces. It didn't have, that one is actually this one here. It doesn't have the varnish or the line drawing on it yet, but we could string it up and see how it sounded. And Arne came in to play it. So we had the instruments strung up. I learned a lot about how to make great sounding instruments. Wiebke says all the instruments that come out of Sigvald's hand sound great because he just has been doing it for so long that he knows how to do that. So another weekend, Wiebke said we should go to Vic, that so you can have inspiration to decorate that fiddle. And so she picked me up in her car and took me across the mountains to Vik in Norway. So this is heading up into the mountains. And this is at the top of the mountain, just sea of snow. It's like 50 degrees again. The snow is melting, but endless sea of snow. And even a a plane with skis on it landed while we were at the top. And people got out with their skis, skied along. Norwegians love to cross-country ski, especially around Voss, and skied off. I'm sure they came back and took the plane home, but I just saw it. So this is coming down the mountain on the other side. And you can see from this map where we went. Here's Voss, and we went over the mountain to Vik here. And this is looking down the valley of Vik. And these are two of the things that Rika wanted to show me. One was this traditional Stav church, and this is a stone church. This was built probably starting around 600 AD, and the stone church is from about 1000 AD. And looking at them did provide inspiration for the decoration on the fiddle. So this is the top of that stone church, and this drawing that I did along the edge was abstracted from that. And this is this carving on the Stav church, the door portal. And I look at things like this, and then I come up with things like this myself. And this fiddle, the theme is Fornesbrunnen. There's a Hardanger fiddle tune called Fornesbrunnen. Fornesbrunnen means the brown horse. It was a heroic brown horse that lived during the plague times in Norway. And I love the fiddle tune, and I've been to the parts of Norway where this horse lived, and so I've used it as a theme for this instrument. And the story is that a woman came out of the mountain bringing a plague in 1349 to Norway. And it affected the people of Mostrand. And so initially there were a bunch of people in the village, and as they died, there was no place to bury them in Mostrand, so the horse carried them on a cart to Rowland for burial. So the fiddle has the start of the plague here with Mostrand and the Rowland on the other side. And the horse goes back and forth between Mostrand and Rowland, carrying the bodies. And as it goes around, the imagery around the outside of the fiddle shows that the village begins to empty out. So at first, there are a lot of people, and then later on there are fewer people. And to visualize this in my head, I looked at photos that my Norwegian family had sent to my immigrant ancestors in the early 1900s. And these are funeral pictures that they sent to Wisconsin. So I kind of used them as my inspiration for what I drew on my fiddle, or what it would have looked like when someone died and they were carried away by the horse on a cart. And the last person carried by, the horse made the journey with the last person who died in Mostrand on his own. So it was a very heroic horse, very strong. But when he arrived at Rowland, he was so exhausted that he lay down on a hill and died. But this horse is legend in the area, Norway. And to this day in Rowland, this is the monument to Fornesbrunnen, the horse that lived in 1349. And this is the current church in Rowland. So I put those on my fiddle too. So that's the way that looks. And so we had finished that fiddle, and I had we didn't have time to finish the decoration on the fiddle in a week I had left. So we went to my second fiddle that I brought over. This is an instrument that I had built previously, and I didn't like the sound as much as my other instruments. So it was a chance to see if Sigvald could help me learn to improve the tone of an instrument. So we took the top off. In my last talk, I talked about how instruments are built using hide glue, it's like industrial strength gelatin. It allows you to break the glue joints and remove the glue easily without damaging the wood. So that's what we did. We took the top off, removed the remainder of the glue, removed that base bar. So this, I built a base bar that was like a violin base bar, and Rebholz said, no, you have to do it different. So we took the base bar off. He said my wood was too thick on the top and bottom, so we thinned some of that out and put it back together. And so while this, I don't think this one sounds as good as the other ones I've built, it's definitely improved from what it was when I brought it over to Norway. It does have, like, one of the differences I think with this instrument is the curve here is pretty dramatic because I was modeling it off of another instrument that I measured here. Whereas Rebholz says they sound better with more gradual curves. But that's something we couldn't change. So, and every instrument sounds different. So we glued it back together, and in this whole process, something my friend Toby Weinberg told me was really resonating with me. The Norwegian saying, ting tar tid, things take time. And here's Toby at the International Master Class, and he wrote to me, sometimes I think this is the most important lesson. You have to think slower and more patiently to learn the music and the handwork. The fiddles were created in a time when people weren't in the hurry they are today, and that's part of why what they are. The hurry spoils the work. So it's, they are instruments that were built in a different time, and economically it doesn't seem like a great idea to be building fiddles, but because they do take so much time, but yet there's a lot of magic in them and a lot of pleasure that goes into building them, and great pleasure that people have in listening to the music and dancing to the music. So by early May, when I was getting ready to go back, this is the view from Rebholz's living room. The school is still there, the snow is gone from his hillside, the lake, which was frozen, is melted, and the lambs came out of the barns. Like, I didn't know. They were kept inside all winter, and the sheep and the baby lambs came out, and they wear little bells, and you can hear them moving around on the hillside. So I had a great month learning from Rebholz, and still am inspired in learning from what he taught me. So I wanted to thank him and Liebke and Oliver Academy for having me there, and Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies, who's funding the grants that American Scandinavian Foundation is passing out for work in Scandinavian heritage and crafts, and Toby Weinberg and her husband Joe. So now I thought I could play a tune or two. If you were here before, you know that this instrument is in a different tuning than this one. And what I want to play isn't in that tuning. valleys in Norway have different fiddle music because, related but different, because they were isolated, and in these isolated valleys, they developed their own traditions and rhythms, beats of music that are slightly different from each other. And after the first talk, I played some music from Voss that I had learned there. And now I'm going to play at least one tune from Valdres. Much of the music is dance music, and one of the dances that's pretty popular even among young people is called the hauling. Has anyone heard of it? Yay, in the back, yes. So as I was driving over today, I heard on the news on public radio, they were reporting on the Eurovision Song Contest. I don't know if any of you, the finals are today, I believe, and it's watched by millions of people in Europe, and I think is maybe getting reported on now because the group that they expect to win the contest is from Ukraine. But also because one of the TV stations in this country was trying to create a similar contest by musicians from different states competing against each other. So in Eurovision, musicians from different countries compete against each other, and all the countries watch and vote on their favorites, and eventually they get to a winner. So one year, a group from Norway won with the Holland dance. So it was a modern group in a modern contest playing a traditional form of music, and all the young kids thought this Norwegian group was so cool. And so then they all wanted to dance the Holland. So this dance allows traditionally the men to show off moves like handstands and flips and twirls, and while the woman has a stick with a hat on the end of it. And the woman will taunt the guy with the hat. In modern times, women can have either role and men can have either role, but traditionally the woman had the hat on the end of the stick. And she would hold it here, and the dancer would be showing off and doing his tricks, and he'd say, go higher, like, because he's trying to show off. And she would hold it higher, and he'd say, go higher, and do more tricks. And eventually it'd get really high, and then the climax of the dance is the dancer does a flying leap and kicks the hat off the end of the stick. So it's fun, and the kids all thought it was great, and then they all wanted to dance the Holland. So I'm usually in Stoughton for Syttende celebration, and there are dancers in Stoughton who do the hauling. So I'm sure they're dancing the hauling in Stoughton today too. But maybe someday in Westby.
Our organization, History Live Project, brought the Stoughton High School dancers here in tail end of February. February 27, 28, whatever it was.
And they did the hall.
Very well received. We presented it as our organization's gift to the community and didn't charge at all.
That's great.
So it was nice. It was a win-win.
Yeah. So I'm going to play a Holland dance tune from Valdres. Have to make sure I'm in tune with it. different from a violin. You're usually playing on 2 strings at once. Like in Baroque music, ornaments are done by trilling, not by vibrato, which is when you see a violinist shaking their hand, that's when they're holding the strings down, that's vibrato. So it's a different style from classical music. Would you like to hear this? What I'm going to play next is another tune from Valdres, and while a halling has an even beat, which means 1, 1, 1, 1, the springer, it's a running dance. It means running dance. It has an asymmetric rhythm in Valdres, and so it's more like. Listen for a rhythm like that in this springer from Valdres. I'll play one more and sit down. This is another tune from Valdres. The reason I know tunes from Valdres is because there's a woman by the name of Laura Ellistad who's from Canada, and she started to learn and to play hardanger fiddle at the workshops of the Hardanger Fiddle Association of America. Then got a scholarship to study in Norway. Did a master's at the Oslo Conservatory, and her thesis was on immigrant fiddlers from Norway who played in the upper Midwest. So she did a lot of research in this area. And now she works at a folk school in Norway as a teacher. And she has taught in Wisconsin. She lives in Valdres, and so that's her area of specialty. And so I learned tunes from her. This one is called Gertrude Hokeland, which means Gertrude, the name of a girl from Hokeland in Norway. One thing about Hollings is they're even beat, but in classical music, often you change bow direction on the beat. But in Hollings, a lot of times the beat comes while you're bowing up, like in the middle of the bow stroke, which, if you're trying to just listen for the rhythm, you don't always hear it. And the tapping of the fiddle player kind of emphasizes where that beat actually is. And of course, if you've grown up there and danced there all the time, you hear it, but it's one thing that makes the music unique. to be here this afternoon and talk to all of you.
Made our Syttende Mai, don't you agree, extra special. I don't know what drew the most of you to come to this rather than all the other choices this afternoon. But one, we're glad you did, because it lets us know in your heart, in your head, that you appreciate learning a little bit more than just regular stuff. I think this is, let's give her a hand, thank you.